Hello everyone, Relative IQ here, and welcome to this new tutorial about a new texturing software that is going to be probably the future dethroner of Adobe Substance Painter and Designer, which is called InstaMAT. It got released back in 2024, but I just discovered it and started using a couple of days ago. And I gotta say that although it is not better than Substance Painter or Designer yet, it has everything you need to make some amazing, gorgeous looking AAA PBR textures and materials. And I'm super excited today to show you how it works because there is very little tutorials about using this software as of the time I'm speaking right now. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so before we can get started with texturing, we first need a high and a low poly model that we can use to put materials on. So here I have this nice little Victorian sconce I modeled some time ago. I have my collection with the low poly. So it's of course going to be a nanite mesh just for precision. So that's why we can have a lot of polygons, like 100k, which is totally fine for nanite inside of Unreal Engine. And then of course we have our high poly with of course a proper naming convention. You can see I have underscore high for every object. And of course it gets a little bit decimated, so it's a bit easier for the software to handle this during baking. And I also have a cage, which is nothing more than a duplicate of the low poly, but with slightly extruded meshes in comparison to the low, just so we can get a bit more precise bake for very tight areas. For example, these leaves over here. So now I can go to the UV tinting map. You can see everything is perfectly unwrapped. There is no distortions whatsoever. And now what we have to do is just grab our low poly or high poly and export. And we need to use quite a bit of different settings for InstaMAT, because inside of Blender, the up axis is gonna be Z, and in my case I set up the Y axis as the forward one. And for InstaMAT we need the forward axis, for it to not be flipped, we need the Z axis to be forward and Y to be up. And these are pretty much the settings I use, so you can just copy paste that. Make sure that if you set this to selected object, you select all your meshes before export, and everything other than that is standard. And then we can hit export FBX, and we can export the low, the cage, and also the eye. Forget these two. These one are just test files I did to make this tutorial. Perfection. So now we are back with the InstaMAT default UI. I just clicked here on File, created a new project, and be careful to not press new package. It's a different thing. You need to press on New Project. And here we being given with different options. With different project types. The one we want to select is going to be asset texturing. I would be really excited to talk about all the different ones we have in here, but InstaMAT is such a complex package that each of these project type would require a dedicated video on its own. So let's get started with asset texturing. Here we need to select a name, so I can name this like Victorian tutorial sconce. For the category, you can leave it as empty for now. We can add this later anyway. And here we need to select a type of texturing workflow. So we have multi-material, which might not sound that intuitive at first, but this is pretty much the standard single UV, single texture set workflow, which is what we're going to use. We also have the UDIM workflow, which allow us to work with multiple UV sets for a single mesh. And we also have multi-material unified, which is the same as UDIM workflow, but allows you to paint across different UDIMs. So just a bit like Substance Painter, this is also UDIM workflow, but you can paint across it. But since we have only a single UV set, we're gonna pick multi-material, and then we need to select our mesh. The mesh we're going to select is gonna be the low poly. So you can either pick it from package resource if you like saving as a resource file different assets, but if you're just starting with InstaMAT, what you're going to use is this. We're going to select the Victorian sconce underscore low. We want to copy our mesh to package, so that way if we, for example, move it to a USB, we move the InstaMAT file on a USB stick or new hard drive, but forget to move the ifbx along with it, it's not gonna cause us an error because we're gonna have it saved inside our InstaMAT file internally at the cost, of course, of a 3.6 megabyte file size extension. So I recommend turning this on to avoid errors. And bake mesh upon creation, you want to turn this on or usually all the time, because we want to bake our mesh before we can texture, but purposely I'll leave it to off so I can show you how to open the bake window manually. We're gonna create a project with our template, because the only template we have is a tutorial one. The resource with the name already exists. Do you want to replace the existing resource? We're gonna keep both. And here we go. Here we are presented with our new project, which is showed right here. We can close it. And we have our low poly sconce. As you can see, it only has a very dull, very boring, dark matte cap. It has no normal map baked in. No information whatsoever, but at least we can see that it's being properly oriented. You can see that y-axis is up and z is forward. And yeah, we can use shift right click to move around, just like in Substance Painter, to move around the HDR background. Alt left click to orbit around the mouse axis. Alt right click to zoom in, and Alt middle mouse button to pan around. So this is for the basic navigation. You can see we get started. We have this little side dock in here. So we have the InstaMAT library. So the InstaMAT library is just like Substance Painter's library. We have everything we need in here. We have the grunge maps. We have already pre-made materials we can use. And we have like some pre-existing mesh. No, I think it's the wrong category. There is another category for message. This is like some modifiers and stuff like that. But we have like noise maps. We have Voronoi. We have turbulent noise. I mean, pretty much just like in Substance Painter. Just a bit narrower. And here we have the classic material channels. You can see we can attribute like here like the normal tangent. So for now it's empty because we haven't baked anything, but it's gonna show up in here. We can choose the normal map format unit. Right now we set it to OpenGL. And we have like base color, height, roughness, metalness, normal height, normal strength. And we can also add channels just as opacity, mask, clear coat and sheen that got added in InstaMAT 2025. And we can also add like custom grayscale maps that, for example, if you want to texture a large object with RGB masks, you could create custom channels, so it's very great. And we can also choose the resolution like 8-bit normal map, 16, 32. Usually just leave it at default. Here we have the package management. So for example, if you mesh So you can see I have it like twice right here. I don't know what it's giving twice. I think it's because I had the file open already. But if you notice, for example, that your mesh has the wrong orientation, you can right click and set, for example, re-import or set re-import from a different file. And if, for example, you bake data, so yeah, as you can see, I still have the previous bake data loaded in here. I can just press delete key and I can delete any map that I don't like. So here it's like sort of your Windows Explorer inside of InstaMAT, and here Windows settings. So you can set, for example, the exposure level, the hue, saturation. Just a bit like in Marmoset toolbag. You can tweak all the different render settings, like you can show wireframe and stuff like this. Only downside I found in InstaMAT as of right now is that you cannot do full resolution screenshots, which is a bit sad because the PBR viewport we even have ray tracing. Once you have like very pretty textures, it looks very awesome. But so far I haven't found a way to make like 1920 by 1080p or like 4K screenshots from InstaMAT. So let's hope they add it into a future release. And back to our project we want to start baking. So here you can see we have the, just like in Substance Painter, we have the resolution we can use. We have the preview quality. So like if you want super strong anti-aliasing or like super crazy ray tracing or not, I just leave this to high. Here we can change the seed for procedural maps. We can show viewport, we can show the side image texture if we want this to be loaded. Like for example, we've got preview curvature. Yeah, so here we can also like enable split, change the layout. And here we can create a new project, save project. We can export. So once we are done with texturing, we can export our texture maps. And the button we are interested in right now is the mesh baking output. All right, guys, so here we are being presented with our mesh baking window, which might look a little bit overwhelming at first, but don't worry, we'll get through everything. So we'll start with the settings on the top left here. We have our target mesh, which is already loaded and is a fancy name for our low poly. Here we have our source mesh, which is going to be our high poly we're going to bake details from. So let's pick a local file, go to victorance_cons_high, select this. Now we have the baking engine. We can choose between CPU and GPU. Usually you want to go with GPU because it's a lot faster. But if for any case, the baking crashes because you, for example, running out of VRAM or anything, just go back with CPU. It's a lot less likely to crash. Next, we have resolution. We can choose between 64 or 4K, or we can probably go even higher, like 8K, if we go to InstaMAT settings and change this. Next, we have super sampling. I usually leave it to none if I'm doing some test bakes, so it's a lot faster. And for final bakes, once everything is good, I just crank it to X2 two times. And next we have store result in package. So once we have baked our maps, if we leave this on, it's gonna store it internally inside our InstaMAT package, or we can specify a custom path. I just leave it to on for the sake of this tutorial. Next we have file name format. So it's pretty much just some naming conventions, like some wildcard arguments you're gonna input, and it's gonna create your final name, which is displayed just in here. So you can see it's gonna be like instamesh dot icon dot normal tangent. And here we also have the file format. So you can see we have all the industry standards format. We have PNG, Torga, EXR, HDR, JPEG, and so on. And then we have our bake button. Before we get started with baking though, we want to play a little bit with the advanced settings to make sure we don't get any baking artifacts later on. So first things first, for the targeting mode, if you have an exploded mesh, we're gonna keep it to all source meshes. However, if you are coming from Marmoset 2 background and using bake groups, which is pretty much the industry standard nowadays, you're gonna go with by mesh names. And as you can see, we have the familiar underscore low and underscore high detection names, which we can modify, which is a great feature. And we also have our outwards ray length in percentage and inwards ray length. So the way you want to calculate this, usually default settings work great if you have a very no a very little difference between your high and your low poly. But just to show you how it works, so for the outwards array length, I'm gonna go to Blender, and here you can see I've got my underscore cage, which is a blue color, and I have my underscore low, which is a green color and is slightly smaller than our cage, or rather our cage is the inflated one in this case, and you wanna play with the outward ray length if you have, for example, something like this. Like here we have a cage, and you can see it doesn't fully encompass or low poly, and it's shown like that. It's a little bit encrusted inside, and this is going to result in a baking artifact. Like it's not going to detect or it's not going to detect or high poly. So what we want to do is when it's like this, we want to crank this setting a little bit up, and what it's going to do, it's just gonna do this. It's just gonna extrude your cage a little bit. And in our case, we can leave it completely down to 0, and it's gonna be great because if we have everything in all our mesh completely encompassed by our cage, we won't have any artifacts. For the inwards ray length, however, usually you can crank it quite a lot. Like I did a test bake with like 50% for this mesh, and it works pretty good. What it does is simply, let's say, for example, we have this vertex here in our cage, and to capture the details of our high poly, it's gonna shoot a ray in distance. And if it's like, for example, maybe I don't know if you set it to like 5%, it's not gonna reach our high poly details. However, if we crank it to like 50%, it can go all the way in here, and you can see it can just gather all the detail information from our mesh. So yeah, so that's a bit of a cheap example here, but just play with the settings and you'll see that everything I'm telling you right now, it's just how it works, you know. So we're gonna leave it at default for now. Ignore bug faces. I just leave it to on. Probably if you have like an open geometry, or if you like baking to a plane, a trim sheet or something, you can turn this to off. Just go and see if you have any baking errors from an open mesh. Average normals, I usually leave these two on because it tends to give you like proper smooth results. For the dilation in pixels, I think you have a chart somewhere in the internet, but what I found is for 2Ks, we can leave it at 8. And if you are baking in 4K, you want to turn this crank it to 16. And what it's used for is if you like downscaling, you have mip maps enabled in your game engine or anything like that, it's gonna like extend a little bit like the pixels on the UV islands, so you don't have like noticeable seams or anything in your asset. And for the cage, you can load cage a cage mesh file. So you can see I have my underscore low in here in Blender, and I have my underscore cage. So just select everything, go to InstaMAT presets and export as underscore cage. Or you can also like just bundle your cage with your low poly and just add the suffix underscore cage, and it's also gonna recognize it as your cage mesh. And of course, when you have this on, you just want to use cage mesh normals, so you know all sharp angles get sharp and everything smooth stays smooth. And yeah, that's it for like the bake settings. Just play around with it a little bit, do some tests. see around if you have any artifacts, and normally it should be good to go. Okay, so last but not least, we have our bake map active baker panel on the right, where we can select whichever map we want to use in our project. For now, I disabled all of them except the normal tangent space, and for a good reason. I want to be able to quickly check for any kind of baking array distance error, like any baking artifacts in our 3D model. We could, for example, also use the AO map, but it's going to take much longer, which is not going to be efficient, you know, like to wait 5 minutes just to get a bake result, and it turns out you had some wrong naming conventions and didn't, or wrong orientation, and it baked wrong. So yeah, so only normal tangent space. I do like to do some of my renders in Unreal Engine instead of Blender. And we get this little tooltip to help us, which is very welcoming from the side of from InstaMAT. So I turn this to on. Normalize per fragment, it just says to turn it off for Unreal and Unity. So I think it's also the same from Blender. So I leave it to off. Output tangent space, I just leave it to OpenGL. You can choose DirectX if you want it to be inverted. And now you want to hit bake. I'm not gonna do it right away. I'm gonna show you like all the other map settings I'm using, and then we're gonna move like to the next stage of the tutorial, right? So for tangent space normals, we're done. Now we want to go with AO, and a little peculiarity. If you go to the AO settings, you can see it doesn't display anything. It tells us that the AO bent normals and reflectance bakers share the settings. And as you can see, we have the settings with the little icon in here. And so if I go like, for example, with bent normals, you can see it adds to same global settings. So don't be surprised if you just turn AO. I did not see anything. You have to go there. So I just remove bent normals because we don't need for project. And the default settings we have, usually InstaMAT gave something pretty decent. It gives a pretty good result for most of your project straight off the box. I feel so. Here we have, for example, like the cone angle. You can leave it like to 0.25 or just crank it all the way to 0 to get. So you can see it gives even the tooltip to get more sharper lighting. We can have attenuate by distance, which if you have like a very deep crevices in your mesh, it's not gonna look completely dark. It's still gonna be like slightly visible. You still be able to see some of the textures, so I like to leave it to on. Random deviation, it makes the render a little bit more noisy but more accurate. Follow square. So submesh filtering, I just leave it to off because I tried it with on and off and didn't change anything. Fall of square tends to result into a smoother map, so I like to leave it to on. And yeah, those two other settings, I leave them by default. The only one you want to play with, which is very important, is the sample count. If you leave the sample count to the default of 16, you'll have a very grainy, very low resolution, like a noisy result. You want this to be at least 64, or ideally, if you're looking for a very accurate, crank it to 128. Some people like to crank it all the way to 256, but the result is so negligible, you know, it just use less processing time for your computer. Okay, so now burst centric. Don't know what it does. I don't use it. I might do a dedicated video for all the bake map types inside of InstaMAT. If you guys want this, request it in the comments. But yes, a beaver normals not using it. Curvature. This one is very interesting because we have two interesting baking type for the curvature, which might give a better result depending on your project. Disk sampling, I leave all the settings by default. What it does is it creates some sort of, I think some matte cap spheres around your 3D model and captures like sort of the highlights. And from those highlights, it makes a sort of approximate sort of AO-like curvature. And if you move it to normal gradient, so this one you can see is very simple. We only have one strength slider. All it does is it takes the normal map curvature information and turns it into a black and white gradient. And I found out that for this mesh, for this specific 3D lamp, it creates very nice curvatures around crevices, hard edges, and stuff. So I switch with normal gradient. As for disk sampling, just crank the curvature sample count to maybe like 32 or 64, so you don't look too blurry and too low res. Other than that, should be good. Next we have mesh ID. Just turn by individual sources mesh to on, so that way you can have like one separate mesh ID per object. Next we have normal world space. It has no particular settings, so this is this is easy to understand. Same for position. Yeah, we have okay, for position we actually have normalized position by AABB. So it's turned to on by default, and I think it should be left to on by default to get better results. Next we have thickness. So for the thickness, I like to leave everything by default except sample count, crank it to 64, so it's not blurry, noisy, sorry. And what other map do we need? Well, we don't really need anything else. We have pretty much, these are like for if you're doing a game asset, this is pretty much all you need. Maybe you can also use like displacement, and set it to full range. But yeah, but we don't really need displacement for a project right now. It's we're just gonna be like full normals. And again, for test bake, so GPU should be. I mean, here right now we're doing the full bake. But yeah, when doing the test bake, just no super sampling, leave it to 2K. And once you are done with this, just move it like to 4K with a super sampling of 2 times. And also a little thing, if you don't have a very strong computer, because InstaMAT sort of likes to bake everything in one go. If your computer just crashes from having too many high resolution bake maps, you can turn multiple of them off and just go with, for example, the only bake the AO, then only bake the curvature, then only bake the thickness, and of course it's going to be a little bit slower, but your computer is going to be less likely to crash uh, instead of, if you were to bake like all of your map in one shot. So yeah, so keep that in mind. Nothing wrong with baking one map after the other instead of making a single batch. A little precision, lads, I want to tell you is here you can see I started baking my tangent space normal map. You can see it automatically adds it over here on the left, and you can see it's properly assigned and it looks great. Sometimes when you're doing, if you bake your map more than once, you're gonna be prompted with this message that the resource already exists and you can choose to replace it, which is gonna use the new bake instead, or you can choose to keep both. Let's say we want to press to replace it. We're also gonna be prompted with the layering project.json file. This is basically this panel. You can see that's blurred. It's a bake panel. If we tweak some settings, it's gonna replace it's gonna replace our previous settings with the new one if we click replace existing, or it's gonna ignore your new changes if you hit cancel. Just wanted to make a little just wanted to give a little precision on this. And there we go, folks. Look at this. I just got done baking all of our mandatory maps for 3D mesh, just so everything works right. So you can see I've got my AO map, curvature, mesh ID, tangent normal, word normal, position, thickness. You can see they're all happening. They're all being shown in this menu in here. You can see like to find them in case you, for example, let's say you want to see the before and after result. So you can see here we don't have any bake normal information. To find them, you want to go to the top show object from the current selected package, and you can see we have all of our maps um, that we just bake just about now. Yeah. Oh, sorry, my bad. I put in this displacement shader. I was wondering why wasn't this working. So here we go. So you can see got all our normals. So just a few tricks I'm going to show you. Like just like in Substance Painter, you can press C to preview all your different finalized map output, and then you can press. So here you can see we have a mesh ID and everything we want. You can then press M to get back into the material view. But one little thing to note is that by pressing C, it will display the final output after you add all of the materials. And a better way to preview your maps is to actually go into this InstaMAT library and pick something that's being called Mesh Bake. And then you can see at all the filtering settings, it's gonna give us something called Mesh Bake Data Mask. We want to select it and not drag it on a specific part of our mesh, but in the entire material library. So you can see I already have it here, but I just turned it off with this little check mark over here. And what we want to do next is to set it to not triplanar, but not decal, but UV projection. And get back in here, and then we can preview any of our map. So here I have my curvature map, which I bake with like a normal tangent space instead of like disk sampling. We have we can input a thickness. We're gonna put a thickness map. You can see it works pretty well. We have our AO map, displacement, and here we want to see, so you can see internal mask. We want to set the mesh bake data mask as an output, and we only want like the base color. So you can see this as a default. I'm just gonna save it with Control S because I'm not sure why it's not why is it not showing the other different types of maps. Okay, never mind. I just found out like within 2 minutes. It was a very simple mistake. I did type in here a mesh bake, and what you want to type instead is mesh select bake data with this little purple icon. And now if I drag it here instead of the previous one, we can now so yeah, we also have to not forget to set it to UV projection all the time. And now we have we can preview all of our mesh bake data. As you can see, it's being set to base color. We don't really need to set the height or roughness or anything. This, if you want a slightly duller, more dull preview, you can set the internal mask to mesh select bake data, but I'll just leave it to you unused. And yeah, this way. And even if you like texturing, you know, here I already have like my texturing material already pre-made in here. So we can move on the texturing part, but we just want to disable everything and have this little map enabled, and we can preview everything we want. The AO, now we have, like you can see, we have the ambient occlusion. We don't have anything for displacement, so it's great, but like we have mesh ID, and yeah, so a very neat little feature that's very important to know for any of your project inside texturing project inside of InstaMAT.